welcome to this last session of the ÉLAN Symposium, which is part of the Women in Architecture Festival. And Elke Dura is just coming in, one of the main people here. Have a seat, welcome. Thanks. So, the festival has been celebrated in Berlin before. This year it is German-wide and with also international guests, plenty of them, and I hope we can contribute to exactly that facet of women in architecture, because it's not only a German topic, it's a worldwide topic, I would say. That's also why myself, Lisa Diedrich, as a representative of the Technical University of Berlin, and in particular leading the chair designing landscapes in the Anthropocene. If you have it in German, Entwerfen von Landschaften im Anthropozän, it gives the nice title of ÉLAN. And that's why we wanted to label this symposium in the context of via Feminist ÉLAN. So that's what we are trying to contribute. And I think we started quite well because you're so many and you're not only women, because it's not always about women, but it's about a particular gaze onto what we are all interested in, landscape architecture, the built environment, the challenges we have in this particular moment that some scholars and also, I think in the meantime, the general public call the Anthropocene, because of the effect, the magnitude also of human impact on all things planetary, often with a connotation to catastrophe, and that's exactly what we want to counter us at the chair, the ÉLAN chair, but I think there's many in our profession who are with us to also see in this name or in this term the responsibility we all bear as human beings with the power we have been acquiring over the centuries of or about all things planetary to turn things to the better. So for us it's an invitation to look at things as they are, to make the best of them, to put our full power and have our élan in order to improve it, to better. And also talk about things that are often forgotten, I think, in this discourse, like beauty or everything that is pleasurable to us, the senses, the sensitive, and so on. So in this respect, I very much welcome you to this last session today, which is the fourth in a series that this symposium has already suggested. We started with a literature salon and talked about collaborative and transnational feminist histories with invited guests from the Scandinavian countries, where I've been a professor before coming to Berlin. Looked more into historic ideas, but also in the sense that this is what led us to the moment we are in, and also possibly to the moment or to the assumption that there is a reason why women haven't been so recognized or haven't been allowed to shape the profession as much as we could imagine they could. In the second session called Transdisciplinary, we had guests from the United States, also from Sweden, from Berlin, from here, to discuss about the entanglement of research and practice, which is called sometimes in academia transdisciplinary, and which we suggested here as a feminist approach likewise, because it would be one that is not so recognized because it is often propelled by women, and it would encompass, of course, in its effect everyone. And also those, you know, as women are often just one category of those which are not so recognized, it would also serve all those others in order to achieve a better inclusion of everyone in this society we live in today. The third session yesterday was one where I gathered some international colleagues. I just see Flavio Sánchez stepping into the door from Argentina, and we had many more colleagues from Latin America, by the way. One colleague of mine, Paula Alfaro, who is straddling between Chile and Germany, and another colleague of mine, Laura Kemmer, who is commuting in between Sao Paulo, Brazil, and Berlin. And then we had a collective that is originating from Buenos Aires, Ensayos Urbanos, with Victoria Cuadrado and Javier de Iralde, and a dancer Carolina de Vega, and we've performed an urban intervention in the form of an urban walk with our big red guest that you can also see if you want later on in the room next door, the Ducto Urbano, that has been animating spaces here in the southern Friedrichstadt as it had been before in the districts of Buenos Aires. And today, finally, we are in the session that I call the Landscape Salon. And salon maybe because it is having a reference to the literature salons that we might know from 19th century. It's about books, but also about everything that's in books, the content of books and the effect that books might have, writings, drawings, and everything that is a contribution to a conversation. So this one, Salon, is one that I've been titling Meeting the Women of Landscape Architecture Europe. So it also already says that it is about a book series that's called Landscape Architecture Europe. So it's pretty much a European session we are having, or we are heading into. And to me, this is, of course, also coming with a lot of people that are part of this book series or the initiative that brought about the book series, in order to say that books can live, that it's more than ink on paper. It is made by a lot of people. And I think I would like to quickly introduce them to you here so you know who's in the room. There's, to start with, our guests directly from the Landscape Architecture Europe factory, I would say. It's a book that has to be made. It has to, it's undergoing quite a big process, and that's a bit something I'd present to you in the next minutes. So we have with us Daphne de Bruijn, who's here she's our graphic designer and managing editor, 25 years of work with Landscape Architecture Europe, I think. So a steady ally in the making of, and she will also be presenting something about it. We have Harry Hasema, just here behind, who is the publisher, who's much more than a publisher, of course, also a landscape architect, part of the foundation that propels this book. So has been with it since the very beginning, even as an idea giver. Then we have with us people who came into the making of this book. Myself, I was one of those. I joined in the very early stages as the chief editor, after having been an editor at Topos, European Landscape magazine, that some of you might still know. It's an initiative that lived up in the 90s, long ago, and has then also been taken up in parts by Landscape Architecture Europe as a European, as really an initiative dedicated to European landscape architecture. So we have with us Marina Cervera, who has come from Barcelona to us today, who is in the board of foundation of Landscape Architecture Europe, and who also has many other roles. We have been teaching together a lot at the ETSAP, the Architecture School of Barcelona, and she's also in the board of the International Biennial of Landscape Architecture in Barcelona, which is an event held every 2 years, as the name says, and has been running there since, 1999, I think, right? So more than a quarter century. And so a little bit older than Landscape Architecture Europe. So her role in the board is also to advise us and to discuss topics that are important in the making of both the book. In our case also, we exchange a lot about what it means to have these different fora for landscape architecture in Europe. Then we have with us Dominika Tihanyi, comes to us from Budapest. She is a landscape architect, likewise, with her own office, has first been selected to present projects within the book, and then later joined as a jury member, because those projects don't get into the book just by the whims of a chief editor or something, but it is heavily discussed by a selection committee of which you have been part. And then you've also been selected in a later edition to animate or to present your thoughts in a portrait on your office, on your personality, because we found you were a very outstanding professional in your field and for Europe. And then we have with us Almut Jirku, who's here from Berlin, who has been one of the earliest people I think I've ever been communicating about landscape architecture with, a profound connoisseur of the German landscape architecture world, of course. Has also been working for the BDLA a lot, Bund Deutscher Landschaftsarchitekten, the German representation of landscape architects, and has always been on the for me, as on the pulse of what's going on here in Germany. So it's a very good writer also, so we are in contact and in conversation often when it comes to talking about what this world is doing in front of us and how we could formulate a position to it. And you lately also talked about us in a European setting, how to connect the European level to the German level. And then we should have had with us Steffi Schüppel, who's a landscape architect also based in Dresden, Studio Cataneo Schüppel. She unfortunately couldn't come for urgent family reasons, so we might miss her today, but I think we'll build her into the next event for sure. She's also representing the BDLA. She is BDLA member, but is also the one who is having a role in the International Federation of Landscape Architecture, is sent as the international representative out there from BDLA Germany. Instead, today we will have joining us on the panel Thomas Haas, who's here with us on behalf of the BDLA, Bund Deutscher Landschaftsarchitekten, and I think you are the representative who's also taking care of European affairs. Exactly. So one direct member of this professional association is with us and can also talk more in depth with about the matters that are involved. They are busy with now. And I think I just quickly show this publication that I think you have just edited this year. It's in German. But it is heavily on the topic that interests us here. It says, do women earn less than men? What about working hours and, well, diversity, gender and inclusivity as a topic inside the profession. So just to tell you how much on the pulse the association in Germany also is. Last but not least, the room is very crowded, and those who populate it are students of the Technical University of Berlin. So we have here 2 courses, which are one of the bachelor level. That's I think around 50 students who join us here today, and the other ones are the students of a master studio that I'm teaching this semester. So to say, it's a bit more advanced students, but altogether a wonderful cohort. And the bachelor ones are the authors of the exhibition that you see here right now in the room, which assembles more than 30 posters, you could say. First, the posters have been the task for this academic term, and they showcase us all the German projects that have ever been published within Landscape Architecture Europe. You can see from Fieldwork, which was published in 2006, over number 2, number 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The latest one is over there. Full of Life has just been published in March. That is like from 2006 to 2025, and if you know that every edition of Landscape Architecture Europe holds the projects that have been drawn or realized in the 3 years before, so this goes almost back to 2000. That is a quarter century of landscape architecture production in Germany, which has been selected by a European jury, so they were presented in a European context. And I think this is quite interesting, at least what I thought, when we have this up on the walls, to discuss, to interpret, and to look back over, a quarter century of German landscape architecture selected by European people and in a European context, to learn something about the development of it. And that's probably something that we will not finish discussing today, but I'd like to go deeper into it with the students who will take the posters to the university, have the opportunity to discuss in the group. But I'd also like to discuss it more with my European colleagues and also with the German representatives in order to see how we position from this country in a cultural production that is landscape architecture. let's see if I have. So yeah, so the exhibition is one thing I'd like to point you at, because at the end of this session we might just pull chairs away and then have a look and look a little bit more into what's on the walls. It's not just simple project presentations, but I asked the students to do critiques. So to critique landscape architecture means, of course, something else than throwing the content into AI and letting some text come out and some images. But this is intellectual work. And I think it's positioning work. What each one individually would do, they think about a particular project that previously has been selected by a European jury. So it's worth diving into those posters, but of course it's a lot, and that's why I think we also need to do something with them afterwards. Then we have a book table here, and this is the one that is more or less taking up the topic of Landscape Architecture Europe #7, the latest edition, which will be presented to you today in the first part of the symposium. And this book has just been out in March, as I said. It has been preceded by 6 other editions, and we have a book table here for all of those who want to have a look into the book, purchase the book potentially, and also have a look at what is the production of, this is Blauwdruk publishers, colleagues in the Netherlands who are dedicated to landscape architectural publications, both in the Netherlands but also internationally. And I think you brought pretty much of the international books with you, or magazines. We have Scape magazine that accompanies this one book, which is specializing on landscape architecture. Scape also includes urbanism and the urban design world. So again, after the session, it's worthwhile having a look, sneaking around a bit, and also browsing through the books and getting inspiration. So all of this together led me to the fact of naming this session Promising, because I think what you see here on the walls is very promising. I think what we in a European team did over a quarter century for landscape architectural conversation is very promising, and I hope that we will be animating a discussion today that might also be promising for the future of this profession. So this is a little bit what I want to close on before we step into the program. I'll invite you to first listen to myself presenting you the last book of LAI, and then to Daphne de Bruijn, also presenting you the book Full of Life, Landscape Architecture Europe #7, but more from the point of view of the maker, because a book is not just printed ink on paper, as I told you, but it is also having a material, it is having a sensitivity, and all these aspects will be presented by Daphne. In the end, also why we still make books, but that is potentially also a thing that we would like to discuss with you. After our 2 presentations, I'd like to invite our panel to a situation here where you might shift your chairs a little bit, but from that panel, I'll animate a discussion in between our members as introduced, but also with you who are in the room. Okay, so what I will try to do, try to do now is to tell you a little bit about the history of Landscape Architecture Europe as a book series, and then to explain to you what is the content of this last edition and why we came to craft it the way we did. So Full of Life, Landscape Architecture Europe #7 is the one book that you have just seen me holding up. It's the 7th in a series, and as always, books are not just books. Books are also propelled by people. The first person who was talking about it, who had the idea, is Michael van Gessel, a Dutch landscape architect from Amsterdam. We see him here in a video that was published quite some years ago, but I still think I captured these 2 moments because they are interesting, not only because it's one person saying them, it is obviously here a man, so nothing against those differences in who voices what, but I think what is voiced here, so Michael says, I'm fond of scale of large and spacious projects, and then he says, I hate adding things just to show that you've been here. for me, that's a position that is not very much corresponding to this male hero of all those star architects or star landscape architects who mostly go somewhere, shape projects, and have left their mark on something. This more modest position is, I think, to me, quite an interesting one, and also one that might characterize landscape architecture, but that also is one that I have heard otherwise from a lot of you as students, but also a lot from women colleagues. How did this all start? When Michael was a delegate for the Dutch Association of Landscape Architecture, NVTL, which is the correspondence to BDLA in the Netherlands, he was voicing the idea to IFLA Europe, which is the European representative or the European initiative that binds together all national associations of landscape architecture. They voted for making a book. He said, if we don't have any forum where to express ourselves, nobody will know about us. And as you, IFLA Europe, European Association, as a representative of all of us, you should also take care of what is said about us and how we can promote the value of this profession and what we can all do. This was taken up by a foundation that has been founded then in the Netherlands with a home base in Wageningen, which is the university town where landscape architects are educated inter alia in the Netherlands. And the structure we gave by then, and this was Harry and some colleagues from the Netherlands, it was modeled on a Dutch publication called The Yearbook of Landscape Architecture and Urbanism, which always had a jury to select the projects per year, in this case, that would be published as a particularly interesting expression of the field. So we created not only a foundation, but also a jury, and you see the first jury gathering here in 2005 in the Netherlands under the auspices of Michael van Gessel, who was the idea giver, and you see that immediately it starts to be a collective initiative. It's not sticking to the one idea, the one man, but we were many, and we were women and men, and identifying as whatever they wanted, but we were looking together at the production of the first projects that got sent into us, and you see the German production on the wall here. So the colleagues who come to the jury are always professionals or publishers, and they come from various European backgrounds, cultures, and ways of thinking in order to look through, as you can see here, a multitude of projects that get sent in freely as promoted by the different European associations from any office or municipality that think they have a very interesting project to show and to get into the book as an illustration of European landscape architecture. So the jury changes from edition to edition. It's never the same, in order to also, of course, assure variety, but also to spread the word. Because each one who has been on a jury once takes back some lessons home, informs closer colleagues, and so the ball is rolling and the message is spread, and we get some sort of European network started. Of course, Europe is big. We cannot, as a jury, travel to each project to see or touch or sense it on site. What we do is going to the closest by projects, as you can see us here in the field, to look at details even that you would not be, of course, able to acknowledge so much if you only see a project documentation handed in. All of this is happening in the Netherlands, so the home base is situated in a small landscape, as anyone around here, but I think it is pretty much a representation of European landscapes. They are looking somehow extensive and full of nature, but they're also very dense and very urbanized, as here in the place where the offices of LAI are situated, with a river in it, fields, but also industries and densely populated cities. So this landscape is a little bit what we are busy with, but we are part of it likewise. The process that leads to selecting and publishing at the end a book, which is an object, just pages on paper, you might think, is much more than just what is in between two cover pages. So the process is that we have a foundation can see here which sets rules and also needs to raise the funds because it costs quite some money to make a book, which then asks I call it always a factory, which is the place where everything is manufactured, that sends out a call for entries into this European landscape, so to say, where offices receive it, think of what is their best production of the last 3 years, send it into a jury, which then will discuss and select those projects, and then also get out some burning topics that each 3 years, are different and need to be voiced and need to be crafted and interpreted. And this is why a group of editors come in, of which have been so far the chief editor, to elaborate the content and also the discourse of what landscape architecture in Europe might mean in this particular phase of 3 years. The material gets back then to the factory, where, of course, through a lot of creative but also sometimes technical processes, the book is made, as you can see it on the table here and you can hold in your hands. So if this is the process for making one book, and we are talking about the book series here, there's an even, I think, more elaborate process to continuing this work over the years. And as I said, now for a quarter century. So if we go on in with a concept and a method, creating discourses, not just publishing project descriptions, but project interpretation. If we come in with saying, okay, we can't do this alone, we need a jury, we need an editorial team, because this is heavy intellectual work, then this goes for one book, where we also need to make up our minds. Once we've did it, we need to evaluate it, because time goes on, and we might need to revise this concept and also adapt our methods. So that was what we then did again, in order to observe and interpret practice for a second time, evaluate it once again, make another one book, and so on and so forth, revise, evaluate, and be ready for crafting the next book. That's why you would also see, when you look at the book table later, that the books don't look the same. It's not like a series where each cover just has a different color. They would vary in terms of size, they vary in terms of what's the structure of the chapters inside, they vary in the way how text and images are combined, where they are placed within the book itself. So there is a way of making a publication that represents something exactly always with respect to the moment when it is kicking in and when it has to make a contribution to what we hear around and what needs to be said or what needs to be commented. So the series, as you can see it, is for now triennial, changing expressions, as I said, and in total always offering a critical reflection of professional practice, but also for professional practice. So it's mirroring, but it might also, through its intention to craft discourse, propel or advance professional practice. So the last edition, I still had a question mark here, because I think this was from the moment where we were still not wanting to offer the last cover, but in the meantime, you have it. The last edition is also the one that you can see is a collective work. I'm quickly pointing at the various colleagues who have been coming together from backgrounds as different as Estonia and Italy, Switzerland and the Netherlands, Sweden, and then the editorial team also collects colleagues from Germany, from Switzerland, from France. The production is based in the Netherlands. So you see it's a variety of people, and I think in Europe we are growing together pretty much, so distance are maybe not so far any longer. But the conversation has been collectively shared, and of course the result is something you could see also displays that variety. This particular edition, number 7, Full of Life, as we called it, reflects design. So we always talk about design work. And I have a quote here by Jan-Dirk Hoekstra, who has been the jury chair, who sadly passed away just before the book was out. But he was convinced that design today needs context awareness. Context awareness, I think, is quite familiar to most of you. We work on it every time in the university, and I think every professional would also see what it means. but it is context awareness in historical, in topographical, in social, in mental, in spiritual senses, and at the same time it must deal with the grand challenges Europe is facing: polarization in society, climate change, energy transition. We all know it, but I think Jan-Dirk linked it quite intuitively and ingeniously to design. The topic of this 7th edition was summarized somehow in the introduction that I was writing after a conversation with all my colleagues and the jury members. And the discussion was focusing pretty much, of course, on the time we are in, sometimes called the Anthropocene, so it's the name of this chair. And this time it was particularly focusing on aesthetics. How does all of this translate into built form or drawn lines or all ways of expression that you could see summarized in the term of aesthetics. And here, of course, we do notify that we went on site. So aesthesis in the old Greek is perception. How can we perceive what's around us? How is this new built environment that design work offers to us important, and how can we relate to it as human beings, knowing that we are not the only beings in this living environment, but we are the ones who can still influence and who have a responsibility to translate what is there into minds of others. So aesthetics as a way of communicating with others has been very dear to us and also practiced in the very jury work. So discussions over the projects that were sent in that need to be selected circulated around what we probably all know, the fear of apocalypse, but also sometimes this optimism that everything gets fantastic, which can be cruel because we never will reach it. It also circulated around the project that were handed into us because they were showing sometimes tendencies pretty much of greening the urban environments or any environment in different situations in Europe, versus another one tendency that was more of sculpting, we would call it, that had been a much more sculptural approach and that was not so fond of what the first proponents of greening would suggest. So there were these two, in a way, competing tendencies that we also thought shouldn't be competing because projects can have a little bit of both. But it's probably a good mirror of what you can see when people of Europe hand in their work to you. And then we also recognized three tendencies, which we described here as the dramatizing all of this anthropocenic fear or this apocalyptic thinking that we have to counter, of course. Then there was a lot of projects that would give an answer in romanticizing nature, for example. And then there was quite a few that in particular would work with participatory processes that would not necessarily be very much interested in is it just yellow or black or green, or does it have this form or another form. We were then summarizing at the everything goes. Of course, this is a caricature of what people send in these days to you, but I think it's a quite interesting one. And in total, we shaped a table of content or an organization of this book that consists of two chapters. The big one first, which were then condensing all the projects that were working with some forms of relating to society and advocating for tolerance of everything that's so different as we can see it. And then another one part of the book that would testify to new ways of making something beautiful. And we called it new beauties, or at the end, because they were very much fleeting and dynamic beauties, we called it transitory beauties. So something that's less static, that might change over time, and that nevertheless is still very beautiful, maybe not necessarily as beautiful as people before us would understand it. In the promise of tolerance, which is the first big chapter, we were talking about the globalized world, that there is all this variety of people living together, often very densely, and that in order to offer design work for them, we might not live without conflict. And conflict, of course, is something, as also the term Anthropocene potentially could be understood as something that could propel you forward, not to erase conflict, but to get into the next step and in a promise of transformation that is valuing respect, appreciation, coexistence, and the engagement with others and otherness. So this was always discussed in an essay that we offer as like interpretation of the projects, but of course it was always based on the projects that we had been selecting with the jury that can be as different as this swimming pool in the north or in the Stockholm area, in a very deep area of high-rises and population who do not necessarily have a garden or somewhere to go to swim. It could be also parks, as here in Ireland, that have been made from scrap materials and with a topic of waste on the basis because it had been built on an old waste dump. Of course, also having a particular aesthetic expression, not saying that working with waste leads to forms that are unrecognizable. Or also in the south of Europe, in the Barcelona region, an old walkway or connection that has been updated in order to offer public space and continuity, reach of different areas in town that hadn't been there before, or at least less easy to go, and as a new neighborhood space, very linear neighborhood space. Transitory beauties is a chapter that would, as I said, propose a new idea of what beauty might be. Again, we were speaking about forms of or postures like advocating for degrowth, being interested in recycling practices, to lead to a new landscape beauty idea that is not static scenery any longer, but it would embrace a transitory aesthetic, not finite but adaptable, not mastered but open-ended, and celebrating ever-changing experiences, and sometimes also appreciating ambiguities of situations that you can experience yourself. Again, an essay introduces this way of thinking, often relates to professionals or scholars in order to connect not only our thought but that voiced by others around us. And it would embrace both small projects like an exhibition in this case in Portugal that was showcasing to the people of Lisbon how the city has been built on a whole complex water artery system and topography, and then sometimes also animated by dancers who would make a connection to those who do not necessarily understand topography and water, but who might understand this form of expression which is performative. But also beautiful as such in transitory forms might be parks like here in Slovakia, where lawn, as in the old English sense, was celebrated, and once of a sudden biodiversity was discovered, but not yet really adapted or accepted by the population, and where it makes, of course, a difference if those pilot projects then once of a sudden come with flowering meadows and are less clear-cut and organized as the popular idea of beauty might have been in this country. Sometimes it's also interesting to reveal and revive, to just work on things that exist, like in this case here in Switzerland, Bern, a historic park that has been a jewel for long centuries or decades, but is of course in need of updating sometimes when public space ideas or habits of people change, and the intervention of landscape architects could then also be to just touch upon several aspects and intervene very lightly to update this beauty that comes from other centuries. To round up the book, we always do not showcase only projects, but we also sometimes interview and highlight particular personalities, as in this case Lili Lichka, who has been a professor of landscape architecture in Vienna for long years and also runs her own office and is, in her case in particular, an activist. So she's, not very happy with too many borders and is in for overcoming them. So in order to do this, she sometimes climbs over fences and animates spaces, as we've done with the students yesterday with the Ducto, and is a very performative person. Sometimes we also highlight new forms of, not just one designer, a big hero, but collectives. In this case, we portrayed the office Tactique, who is active in Brussels and Paris likewise, so it's an office in two sites, who works a lot with participatory projects and says, as we say here, that residents are the real creators, and we are maybe just those who facilitate the process that they need in order to shape their own landscapes in mostly, in their case, densely built up cities like Paris and Brussels. And then finally, we were in this particular edition interested in looking a little bit around what's not only in the very boundaries of Europe as we know it, but also the adjacent world regions. Sometimes, if we just talk about our close neighbors, called Orient and Occident relationships. And we were looking around if we found people who are at home in both situations, both in Europe themselves, but maybe also in the Middle East or in North Africa. And we found some of them to interview as so-called straddlers, going across, having both identities, having both professional lives, knowing both places. And we went to collect their voices and write upon them in a very short way, getting to the fore the most elucidating, convincing arguments. I think we have Kamel Louafi with us today, over there, who is one of the interviewees, who is at home in Berlin as much as in Algiers or Algeria. And of course, they were women and men, so we do not differentiate, but we were thinking that these ideas of having multiple identities corresponds to pretty much also to a thinking that is not so defined, but would leave open a much more ambiguous and fleeting identity, as it is voiced also in feminist scholarship. And finally, we invited a colleague of ours, Serge Bredezar, who you might know, who's running the international landscape platform Landazine. It's publishing widely, it's freely accessible, has always the freshest news. So he comes across a lot of landscape projects, and we asked him to express his way of looking at what is at stake today. So he was writing the essay about aesthetics of public spaces in times of socio-ecological transformation. And he went pretty much to say, you know, there's a lot of our colleagues who just go for animating nice designs on the top of the rug, but what if we would look under the rug? What has been hidden below? What do we not yet voice so well? What is, partly greenwashing? What is projects that we could discuss a little bit more critically? Points at some situations all over Europe where he finds tendencies that he finds more interesting for further discussion, not just getting it or appreciating them in a very quickly mediated form, but according to him, we should engage in more critical discussion about them. So, I think in the total, what we were always after with the book series and continue to be, is to, again, according to a quote by Jan-Dirk, our jury chair, is to show the joy of working with all of this, be it structures, be it materials, be it details, and that there is an authentic handwriting and craftsmanship that can add excitement to the environment. So each one of you, when you are a designer, you have to, of course, intellectually position yourselves, but at the end, there's always in landscape architecture an urge to translate into the physical environment what you have been thinking, how you have been positioning yourself, and that is very much also about crafting things with your hands. There's this craftsmanship as an art of doing this. And in a way, this is also what leads us to still do books, because books are also crafted. They are sensual, they can be circulated, and they carry all this intellectual content, even though we live in a digital world. But for some, it might be very clear that there's also a joy, as we say here, of working with the material of the book as a very physical one. And I think on this, I'd like to close and also invite Daphne to tell us a bit more about that joy. This is the clicker. Yeah. So the right one is next slide. Okay.
Okay, cool. Hello. Nice to meet you all here today. I'm Daphne from Blauwdruk Publishers in the Netherlands. And Lisa asked me to tell you something about the making of the book. I've been part of the LAA series since the beginning. I think 20 years ago I made the first design sketch for the first book. And now we're presenting the 7th one. So it's been quite a time, quite a journey. And it's always been a feast, actually. Like you see here, this was the jury weekend from the last book. And we always also go visit projects. And here you see some editors and jury members. And we're in Nijmegen visiting a project. I'm really happy and surprised to see all the posters that you made. It's really nice to, I'm actually kind of impressed by it. You make your, at least what I heard from Lisa is that you made your own text, like a critic text, and you chose your own pictures and your story. So each poster you tell your own story, and that's actually what we are trying to do in making a book. For me, it's really important that we tell the story of every person that's in the book. So we start, of course, with the designer. Where do I point?
In the middle is here. This is the red. This one. And then you have a little.
No, I need to go to the next slide.
Oh, the next slide is to the right.
Oh, yeah, right. Okay, thanks. So you can see a designer is the first start of the whole project. They know the way they design, they know their choices, they know the way they put their creativity in them, and they collect everything and they send it to the jury. Oh. The jury is present and they make their story. So they look at all the projects, think of what are important themes at that point of time, what are the specific things they want to show in the book. And during these sessions also the editorial board is present, and also they listen and make their own story. You see them discussing. And then after that, that all comes to our table, and we have to make our own story as well. Yeah, that's us, making late hours. And I think I have to take you back to the design of the first books. In the beginning of so we have always designed them in pairs, so you could say like around 6 years. And in the beginning, when you were all really young and maybe not even exist, there were no social media. So the way to present projects was really like big book, nice pictures. It was, really a good way to show. And then we entered the second series. And we had to change things a little bit, not really big, but it was still project-based, but we started to put the themes in a more important place. But the really big change came when we made the third series. The social media, everything was all over the place. Every designer, every office could present their projects everywhere. The info was everywhere. So we felt like the story of the books had to change. It was not enough to put only the projects in. So we made the decision to put the story of the jury in front of everything. And they were told in thematic essays, and the projects were presented along those essays. And now we are at the... Oh, you're doing this good. Now we're at the fourth series, and we've been rethinking, and now everything is kind of working like it's the way it works. And we think it was time to put the projects back on its pedestal, but still use the same content. So all the thematic essays are in there as well. That's okay. Go. like it's really easy, normal to put a content page with text. But as I said, we have been trying to make it more project-based book, and it felt like more natural to also present the projects that were in there in the beginning of the book. So we, they were all in chapters, and we've been trying to make kind of a dance through the chapters. Like you go from the top left to the right bottom, and the next page you go from the left bottom to the right top, and so it goes. Okay, and now we're entering the parts of the book. Like Lisa said, the topic of this book was aesthetics, so it's kind of a particular and important topic. And I felt that you can't make a color scheme that's really obvious. So you have to choose a little bit of laid-back colors. And it should also be colors that are used in darker shades, but also in lighter shades. So this is how you enter this part. Oh no, that's not correct. It's another, that's the other color. Those are two, it's not black, it's in color, but it's really not that prominent. And here you enter such a chapter. Always use a big image to get into a project or into a theme. And here you've come into one specific chapter. Oh, sorry, now I'm going too fast. Yeah, yeah, this one. The essays that are in the beginning of a chapter are on the lighter version of the dark color, you could say. And this is a project-based page, and it's all in white. So remember, in white. We have put the typography, the text is hung up on the top of the page. And here you see, like, in presenting the projects, we also have to choose which images we're going to use. So you always have a master plan, of course. But we also think that for a reader, it's important when you go through a book, because it's 400 pages, you have to stay focused. So it's really important to give a good balance in small, in big, in different things. So a bigger picture is always really nice for a reader to just dive into the project and be there. And this is so you have a master plan and different images. And we're always looking also for pictures that are kind of surprising or have a nice element into it. So this is, for instance, the designer that is jumping into his own design pool. But this guy as well, he puts immediately a smile on your face when you see him. And this is an example of a project page in which I can show you how we look at presenting a project. Maybe you have all been doing that in your posters as well. But for us, it's really important to show the different things around the project. So we are trying to give an overview of the project. We're always trying to, the top right ones to be in the project. On the left, the way it is made, the project. And on the bottom right, a special one if there's place for that kind of stuff. And what was always important is the voice of the jury. And we put colored streamers, like the one on the right, on the pages. Like Lisa already showed, we have also two portraits in the book. That was important to change the color, but also keep it a little bit laid back. This is a portrait from Tactique, just the text and the images that correspond. And what's really nice when you have a big book of 400 pages to get some rest in it. So calm and serene pages to just get a little bit more rest. So essays are really valuable in that for that thing. And then you end the book. And for me as a designer, when I've been working through the whole inner side of the book, it's really nice to get to the end, because then for me it's kind of a party starting. I have to make the whole combination. So you have the Pantone colors that are the basis of the book. Here's the foil print for on the cover, and the maroon colored linen for the cover page, and the headbands. And it's really nice to make that combi. And then you end up like this. That's the combination for this book. There's the foil on the linen print. And here you can see the book block. And you see 6 white lanes. And you see the colored pages in between. The colored pages in between are, for instance, the chapter starts or the portraits or whatever. But the 6 white lanes are the projects. So you can see that this book is mostly a project-based book. Well, and we were looking at this, and I was wondering, actually for me it was a question, like you have been working on your poster, your personal thing, and would it have made a difference for you to design if you would have known it would have been a book? So would you have made a different choice in your text? Would you have made a different choice in the type of photos you have been looking at or choosing? Well, that's for me a fascinating thought. I hope you enjoy the new book of LA. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Daphne. And thank you so much, everyone, for being patient to listen to us. Yes. I would now like to invite you to discuss, and I'd like to invite our panelists to come to the floor, to the other one seating option here. Have a seat where you find one, yes, this here. Microphone that we can share.
Do you want to share, Lisa?
I will take this one. Here. Oh, that's good. It's okay. Probably standing out. So again, to remind you of who we have here in the room, and all of those who are seated so they would look towards the screen, you might want to shift your chair a little bit so you can look at our panel more easily. We start with, would you like to join? Nee? Yeah. Just there. So we have you in the picture also. We have Daphne, who you have identified. Then we have Dominika from Budapest, landscape architect. We have Marina from Barcelona, landscape architect. Thomas Haas from Berlin, landscape architect. And Almut Jirku from Berlin, landscape architect. So each of those people have a role or a relationship to landscape architecture Europe, and that's a little bit what I would like to ask you first, each one of you. And then we open up, and I'd like to hear if there's comments from your side, if you want to engage with one or the other, with us in total, to discuss landscape architecture in Europe. And also, as you see, we are pretty many women, but as I said initially, it's not only to us to speak, but it's to us to probably discuss the role we can have, or as I said here, meet us. I'll start with Almut. As I said, we have been conversing since a long time about landscape architecture, and I've experienced you as a person who has always been having a critical voice, appreciating a lot of projects or thoughts, but also sometimes challenging them. And I think this conversation, to me at least, has been always very fruitful, but I would like to know from you why we need a landscape architecture critique in this sort of debate around our profession, the topic, maybe also what we do at the university. And you could pick this up, shift to green. Here. Oops. That should work.
Well, thank you, Lisa, for this kind introduction. And yes, why do we need landscape architecture critique, and why do we need books like this one? Firstly, I think we need them to widen our horizons, especially since other publications in Germany at least have deteriorated. Topos used to be a very, very good journal where you saw landscape projects and landscape thoughts all over the world. In the end, it started with being about Europe, and then it tried to cover the whole world. And also Garten und Landschaft, our most simple journal, I would say, has lost a lot of content in regard to landscape architecture and has become, in my opinion, very uncritical. And I had occasion to go through all the toposes let's say Lisa Diedrich and Robert Schäfer period in 1920, 1921, all following them, and I rediscovered how much knowledge and views are hidden in these tomes. And I can only encourage students to go to the library where they still are and have a look at them. And I must say, although I read quite a lot of newsletters and the journals which remain, most of the projects in this book I didn't know before, only 2. And also, well, I knew a bit more of the office's practices you described, but not really. The most of them were also new to me. So we need these books to widen our horizons. But it is not only the project, the description of the work, which is valuable, but much more even the discussion about the projects. What questions are asked, what relations are seen, what differences. We need this to sharpen our vision and our understanding. Well, in the public domain, we also need these books, etc., to demonstrate what landscape architecture can do, how many different topics we can deal with, how many different environments we work with, and how all this makes our living space a better space to be in. Even today, there are many decision makers who know nothing or very little about the contribution of landscape architecture for a better life. There are still quite a lot of countries in Europe where the profession is not recognized yet. To change this is an important working field for IFLA Europe. Books like this help. Another question is, how does landscape critique help with our individual professional education? In everyday landscape criticism has a negative connotation. But that's not the origin of the word, the notion. In the professional domain, there it is neutral. It can take any direction. What exactly is critique? Some definitions from the internet. The word comes from Greek kritikos, verb krinein, to separate, to judge, to decide. It means the achievement of general discernment, Unterscheidungsvermögen. Architectural criticism is a method of debate. The built environment is assessed under the aspect of differentiating and questioning. The critic's statement thus appears superficially to be a judgment of a building, but it is actually something else, namely a positioning based on a case in the field of architectural discourse. The task of art criticism is not to present the true meaning of a piece or work, but to verbalize possible meanings. It does not close down the meaning, thus thriving out the openness that makes art art, but quite the opposite. It opens it up. For it does not counter the spontaneous interpretation of the thoroughly heterogeneous audience, with a better or legitimized interpretation, but above all with a different but also possible one. And the more complex a work is, the more possible interpretations are there, at the same time and in the course of times. Each generation can put new questions to the work. That's what Umberto Eco means with opera aperta, open work. There is never a definite answer, but always new questions. Therefore, the work the jury has done for this book is very important. They look at the project from different perspectives. Everybody sees something different, but in the discussion process, everybody sees more than alone. So they come to a better understanding and interpretation of the individual projects. They recognize what they have in common and what separates them. And after viewing the whole body of work in the end, they can describe new trends in the profession. In my former work, organizing competitions for landscape architects for about 30 years, I participated in many juries. In the preparation process, I saw all contributions and formed an opinion. But it nearly always changed by following the discussion of the jury, all the different viewpoints, questions, and perspectives they had, coming together more and more in the discussion rounds. And by writing down the juries, be it of the book or in a competition, give us a chance to follow the process and broaden our knowledge and with this our ability to see. Goethe is often quoted with, "Man sieht nur, was man weiß." You only see what you know. An experience most people have after learning something new, one sees it everywhere suddenly. To study landscape architecture is a lot about learning to see. A good teacher has this ability to teach perceiving, observing, to open up one's view for subtle differences. Good teachers and good jurors are not necessarily very good landscape architects themselves, but it's also the other way around. Good landscape architects are not always good jurors or teachers. So a good critic is not necessarily someone who can do it better, but he or she sees more and can show the way to proceed. Critique is about possible viewpoints, not absolute truth, which doesn't exist anyway, at least not in the arts. Der geschulte Blick, the trained eye that is able to differentiate, is an important tool to advance the profession. To quote Goethe again, das wahrhaft Große zu erkennen vermag jeder, wobei da ich meine Zweifel habe. Aber im weniger Großen, das Gute zu erkennen, verrät den gebildeten Geist. Anyone can recognize the truly great, but to recognize the good in the less great betrays the educated mind. That is what a good critic can do, to point out the good aspects in a work with a trained eye and the educated mind. That is what we need landscape architecture criticism for, and much more of it than we actually have. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Almut. This is truly promising and encouraging, as we call this session. I think it does mean a lot to us, and I think also to all those of you who are here who have been working on those posters, because we call them tableau critique. It's not project descriptions, but it's project, positions. Every one of the students who had a project out of this book series were invited to take their own gaze and own position towards them. So if you dive into them, you will not only discover a project, but also a position and the relationship in between the one who looks at it and the project as it has been perceived and also offered, of course, by a designer to start with. I think this idea of critique and also making books about them and hopefully more, takes me to investigate how this is an activity that coexists with what the BDLA as a German representation or a representation of the German profession of landscape architecture does, because I would reckon this is more, the idea is to promote, to also make the profession more known, to get it together. How do you think, these different takes on the profession, on landscape architecture are seen? How is, other associations as BDLA and other initiatives like LAE, are they working together to shape the field of our profession?
So, hello. Unlike Almut, I am completely improvised. I have nothing prepared. So, to answer your question is, as an association, we are always committed to bring forward themes and topics towards the society and the policy. So that means we are trying to lobby for our themes, but also for our profession. I mean, as I can recall, when I finished my studies in 2000, no one was waiting for landscape planners, landscape architects. There were literally people saying, yeah, you could go to the unemployment agency directly or work, from project to project, very less paid, very poorly paid. Now we have a completely different picture, which is good for you, students, but also good for our profession, which means that the things we were dealing on, climate change, climate adaptation, resilience, and so on, which has been issues for many, many years in our profession. We didn't label it officially that way, but it had been a very important issue already. That gives us a strong position, let's put it that way. We are asked by some ministries, when we try to make discussion roundtable talks with ministries, with representatives of the ministries. Recently, we went with our working committee of international affairs to Brussels. Almut was there as well, and we were greeted by Olivia Gibner from the European Commission, who is one of the delegates of the COP30 in Brazil. That it's palpable that our profession is more and more recognized. It's still not as recognized as, let's put it that way, famous architects. I mean, if you can name, I guess when you ask 100 people, they know at least 5 to 10 popular architects, contemporary, but
male.
Yeah, male, of course, yeah. Zaha Hadid maybe, but she's dead, so we put her aside, rest her in peace. But landscape architects, it's a little bit difficult because I don't know, maybe we're the good guys, the good girls, trying to save the world, but not talking enough about our work. And that's why LAE and also what my association is trying to do, lobbying for landscape architecture towards the society and politics, is important, as I would say, and I'm quite confident that the work is still standing. What I'm doing, yeah.
Thank you so much, Thomas. I think this is also good to a new generation of landscape architects who sometimes in different settings, like academic circles, might not be as much aware of how recognized they are or our profession is in other circles. As universities need to save money, there's a lot of talk about, just kicking this out or too small to exist. But I think there's other realms, and I think it's also really important for you to be here and talk to us.
Yeah, just to add one thing. Also, I'm also in charge with another working committee is doing on education. And we are visiting the high schools, the universities where landscape architecture is being taught. So in total it's 14. So we try to get in touch also with the academic world and to contribute. So our field is very multiple and complex.
We need you. I would like to continue to ask Dominika, who's here from Budapest, who is you're a practicing landscape architect since quite a while. You've found an office which goes on for quite a while. You've been coming into our book series through sending in an entry and being selected with work that was quite exceptional at the time because it was displaying a sense of activist work. And so I would like to know from you what it means to be activist to start with as a professional, then once of a sudden getting into a European context, then being invited to also join the jury to then select other people's work, and then at the end also being portrayed as an outstanding personality because exactly of this engagement. How do you feel you state your own activity as a professional as in this world of, as you can have heard, of shaping discourses, creating or empowering landscape architecture and propelling messages, we would say, conversations?
So I have to say that it was quite a surprise to be selected back then in this book. That was more than 10 years ago. And the thoughts that were selected, because I consider them more thoughts and on our profession, on part of our profession, they dated back to the 2000s. So they are really old thoughts, but I think they are still very actual even today. And it's I think it's important to say that in this book there are really beautiful and exceptional and yes, very forward-looking works which you can really learn a lot from. I really believe that that the change that was made, you know, in the fifth book when we were going in a different direction was a really important one for me too, because I really believe in the power of thought and the power of discourse, and just sometimes you learn much more from reading. So it's not. I think it's more important to read than to just look at the images, because then it's just the copy-paste word we're going into. But we have to understand the underlying meaning of things. And this was actually, well, Mark, who was interviewing me in 2014, he was also getting at, he was very interested in understanding why activist thoughts come to a landscape architect's mind. And as I started out, I think that these are like 3 years you are presenting 43 to 50 pieces of works, which are exemplary. But when you look around, you see, well, landscape architecture isn't producing, you know, this sort of uniqueness overall. And especially in Hungary, when you go back into the 2000s, and we were actually not really having any new works done. That was the time when we were starting to actually have like 2 new parks in the whole of Hungary. And at the same time, everything was very different. So you had commissions, you were asked to do things that people wanted you to do. So you were starting to have this feeling that you had a piece of land and you could do whatever you wanted to, but you were partly told what to do. And this was really starting to hit me, you know, who's telling you what to do and why they're telling you what to do and what is happening in the city with different pieces of land, and why isn't it a common good? Why isn't it serving people? You know, it was all starting to be privatized, many things. So it was a very difficult phase. So yeah, basically what I was thinking is that you need to, as landscape architects, we have to think of what is happening systematically in our systems, and we have to try to help change occur differently. And you cannot really do that because systems are just so difficult to get into. And sometimes it's just easier to go out on the street and do asphalt paintings on the surfaces and just get people together to talk about things. And sometimes you just have to be an outsider, and I think this is important, that if you're an activistic landscape architect, you're a little bit of an outsider, and you're actually doing efforts. I think it was all about not just doing designs, but to think of actually wanting to make change on a deeper level, in society. To have changes in society towards this perceived common good, what you think of it as a common good. And it's, I think this sort of thing that you do is, it gives you also freedom, a sort of freedom. You can really put those ideas into your work that nobody maybe cares for, but they are really important concerning the people who are using these public spaces that surround us. So, it's making change differently, I think. And I think it's still important because we have all these processes going on. And if you look back, it starts from the 60s. I mean, when you think of it, that time even Agnes Denes emphasizes that you have to question things. Maybe this is the most important thing. Do not accept everything as it is as a landscape architect, but try to question things and develop new systems, to think of new systems. And at the same time, when you're thinking systematically, like design is here, system thinking is here, and going out on the streets and to the people and doing it very tangibly is another, layer. And the system thinking and going out doing it with your hands, it really does have, it has a big impact on your design afterwards. I think that's really important.
Thank you so much, Dominika. Thank you. Well, I think I have been showing the cover page of this portrait of yours that we made a while ago in many of the courses, and you probably have seen it all who are here, which says, we shouldn't always draw what is asked of us. And I think that message, as we hear it from you here, is very powerful. And I think having it in the pages and being able to travel to many more people than are in the room here is even more important. So I think that's a claim, it's an invitation. But then if the book is a forum for making such thought travel, I'm coming to Marina, because you have been part of the board of LAI, because it's also having it's a system, sort of, is a foundation. Foundations have boards, and they have juries, they have editorial teams, as we've heard. So the people on the board, they are also our North Stars in some sense. They guide us, they consult us, we discuss with them, and they do not necessarily need to do the groundwork. But it's often very important to get the orientation from them. But you're not only there as a landscape architect from Barcelona, you're also there because you're part of another forum, that's the International Biennial of Landscape Architecture, that has been celebrated in Barcelona for many, many years. And so you are animating your own forum, which is somehow in contact with us. We have always been exchanging, and I don't know, from addresses to send out calls to thoughts that we need to put on stage, or people we could invite because they would be particularly suited to talk about a particular topic. But I would like to ask you, what do you think? How can we give voice to the profession, to landscape architecture, through those, be it books, fora, or other media? how do you think they work together, or they should work together? How could we become stronger in a European sense, you know, of being this networking constellation, let's call it?
Thank you, Lisa. Before I start answering, thank you for the invitation. It's very nice, and it's really interesting to hear all the different aspects that we've been commenting, because in fact when I was trying to reflect on what we are trying to build here, for me it's all about how we build this community of practice, and that's for me the only main point. How we do it, how we reach to that, we can do it by different means. Of course, critique, as Dominika and Almut have been pointing out, it's the most critical one, because it develops narratives and it develops different points of view. But there are also other ways. So for me, if I follow this thread of thought of creating the idea of a community, there's something about identification, that you are within people that are doing the same as you are doing. Recognizing that there's a potential to it, and then creating different products that can be targeting at different kinds of people and different profiles. So thought might be a good way to lure people in academia especially, but there's also another huge range of people that we have to convince, like politicians. And that's where I go with Thomas on my left side. So those people will maybe not read, critique very in-depth text, but they can actually understand the power of images and how transformative landscape can be something that they need to promote within their own minds. So for me, everything that we do, and we have met with Lisa in very different moments of lives and different situations. So we've been working together academically, trying to find the values of projects. We've been trying to do things on editorial sites, but everything works around this idea. So creating a community of practice, we've said that there's the recognition of the potential, that we knew that, and we knew from the very beginning that it was there. So the Biennial starts in 1999, LAE starts a little bit after that, but there's a moment that Europe really needs the fact of recognizing that it's a discipline. It was not a discipline recognized on any of the southern European countries. So Spain, Italy, Greece, still not there yet. So just recognizing that there is a community in Europe of people that are able to transform the landscapes and to generate through design new realities. That was the first moment, and it's not that far there's away. I know that you are really, really young, but in terms of like our history, it's a really short moment ago. Then there was a moment of this idea of like coexistence and cooperation. That's when we started. The Biennale started as basically an event that wanted to concentrate around the city of Barcelona talent. So we wanted basically, and it's exactly what we want now, what we want is to lure knowledge to the city, to improve the quality of our landscape architects working for privates and working for the local administrations. We are a non-for-profit organization. Our money comes from taxes. So we have to be very, very, very aware of that. So what we try to do is to take talent from around the world and bring it to the city so that there's a discussion going on to create a momentum that then it will generate something different around where we are. So it goes from global to local, and that's our idea of that. So starting from a moment that it's just an initiative of recognition of a potential of the profession, it then has evolved into these 2 prizes. Then the one that is the most well-known, that is the Rosa Barba Prize, which is for professionals, and it awards like built work that was done in the last 5 years. And then we have another award, which is the Ribas Piera Award, which recognizes the best students' work, just like you, that are presented, gathered by a faculty member, and that moves this like position on what the universities are doing forward. That's for me interesting because it deals with both, so thought, critique, academy, and profession, and how you try to make something out of this combination. And this project has been going on. It started as a European project, and now it's more an international outtake. So from 2008, we just had a bigger scope, as we did not have that much European projects because we were in crisis. So that was the main reason to increase the scope. And we are now in this like fourth phase of the creating and cultivating a community of knowledge, which is managing something that it's mature as an initiative. So we have 2 established prices, just at the same time that LAE has also matured into a very, I would say, grounded project. So that the shape, the form, the texture of the book and the idea, it's very clear. And we've tried from the Biennale to offer a product that would be complementing the LAE book, not trying to compete with it. And I think that was our managing that succeeded into doing that. So what we produce is another type of book, which is a catalog. So all the entries to the Rosa Barba book that have been approved and they are according to regulations are shown in that book. In a way, that's, for me, circulating back to this idea that you need different products for different target audiences. So we have books that go in depth into 50 projects, and then books like the catalog that we produce that is giving you out 250 projects. Maybe not all of the first interest, but you have there the variety, you have there emerging professionals, you have there the first works that are intentionate, you have there the amplitude of registers of the profession, which is very, very, very interesting to see. And once you can also see those catalogs in time, then you recognize the evolution of certain firms, certain brands, so certain people in time. So just to answer back to the question, 5th phase of cultivating a community of practice would be transformation. So that's for me the ending part. We have mature products. We are trying to establish something that it's now complex to circulate, but that gives back, I think, a lot. Maybe now it's a moment for transformation towards something that at sometimes can be more homogenic, harmonized, I would say, more than homogenic. So that would be, for me, the idea for the future, how we can like regroup all these initiatives, giving each one the identity and the maturity that it already has, but at the same time presenting this as a very mature community of practice that we can showcase. Thank you.
Thank you so much. No, thank you so much, Marina. I think this is great also to see in faces, because all of this is not very old in some sense. You know, if you see it, it's, don't know, development of other professions. This one is still pretty young and has been pretty powerful, partly propelled by women, I would say. You know, Rosa Barba Award and the US jury members, board members, and all of this. In figuring out that they have been shaping in different ways over different phases over these 25 years, sort of. And then being at a moment where there is quite some maturity out there in the book, in the biennial, in all their formats and ways of getting messages out. And this is in an international European sense. So then how to get into the next phase and coordinate even better, if I understand. You know, managing it also might mean putting heads together in whichever way. And we have, of course, digital media now. It's much easier to wrap your heads around a particular topic. We quickly meet on Zoom. And I still think that moments like this, if you are in the same room, of course, even if for short, they are propelling even much more, because you see the whole person and you can react much more in nuances and depths. But yes, I don't know how many of you, this is opening up a little bit to the audience now, how many of you did know Landscape Architecture Europe before coming to this session? How many did know the Landscape Architecture Biennial in Barcelona before coming to this session? A few. But maybe now, more walk out knowing more. So this is a start. So I think in order to your fifth phase of transformation, we need more people to think about it, right? To have them joining. And I think that goes on a European level. I would think that also goes on a German level of the professional association, Thomas. I don't know, how many of you know BDLA? This is good. Winner. So there's a lot of talented people who might be having a voice within. Go to the table. We have on the book table some materials, by the way, that might interest you. Who you need to push it on. Can you like this?
For students, it's free to become a member. You only have to pay if you earn money.
This, of course, it's very fair. So just to give you the opportunities to ask back or comment back on what you have heard. If there's anyone who wants to offer a question to our panelists or to Daphne and myself, the moment is now, or in the time to come. I'll let you reflect a bit, but there's one directly, Elke. This tea.
Hi. Thank you for these impressions and about the book. So I get known you 4 years ago in case of your presentation of the last book, maybe, I don't know. I was impressed and now I'm again impressed. So a lot of work behind, of course. But I have a question first to Barcelona, and second to all of you. A question I have always in my mind, in case I'm an architect. I'm not a landscape architect, okay? So it's a quite simple question. But first, I want to say, in Barcelona, you started with these super blocks. And it becomes very popular here, recognition, in case of, put out the traffic and closed spaces, open public spaces, former having been streets, now pedestrian places, public places, so-called superblocks. And this is very interesting, and I would like to have it here also. But my question is, I'm wondering, landscape architecture and street planning, traffic planning, how does this come together? I mean, I'm living here in Berlin, and Barcelona is also a big city. Parks is one part, but the public space, like streets, like crosses, which you closed now. So how are the landscape architects involved in such topics like street planning, cross plannings? So are you asked then for make it maybe a little bit more nicer?
Okay, so I'm taking this personally because I'm the author of one of these superblock accesses. So I was in a team, the one that won the street of Girona, which is a vertical street. And there were 4 studios within my team, just within one team of one street. So it was Martí Frank, in my team. That was a landscape architect, myself, that I'm both architect and landscape architect, an engineer studio that is Steco, that it's not, it's very well known in Barcelona because they did all the public space that you can imagine in the 90s. And then still another architectural and urbanist studio that was Cáceres. So four of us gathered to make a temporary union to apply for this competition. And it's not the only case, like lots of other people that were participating in the Super Access made these kind of complex and very complete teams to be able to respond to the call that the town council was doing. Because it had to do with mobility, it had to do with vegetation in the street, because there was this idea that it had to be renaturalized. It had to do with the design in the urban scale and at the technical scale. So I would say that how we dealt with that, most of the teams, it was trying to build up complex teams and not to go to the competition by ourselves in little small teams as we would have done like 20 years before. That's a game changer. And also at the same time, the second game changer in the Superblocks project, I think what makes it interesting is that it's a collaborative work. It has not worked like all the other competitions that I know of, that it's the city, a town council that launches a big competition, it divides in 7 different venues, and then appoints one team per each one of the venues. That's not the case. So the trick or the magic to this project is that there's a competition at the abstract level on how, in a theoretical, critical way, you should transform a street. This goes into a competition that it goes with an anonymity, so nobody knew who was behind the proposal. So they selected 4 teams, understanding what they were proposing as a mastermind to change the street. And then they opened up, they decided who were the winners. They assigned, in principle, 1 team per each one of the 4 streets, and 1 team per each one of the intersections, which has what we call the plazas. Okay, so that's 8 teams in total. At the same time, the town council created an office within the town council, taking away professionals from different fields to make this Superblocks office, as they call it. That means that they took somebody from the planning department, somebody from the green infrastructure department, somebody from the materiality and resistance department, and they created like an own internal team from the town council that would be dealing with us. And then it started something that it was interesting, that it was not each one developing the project that they had won the competition with, but organizing these kind of cooperative sessions in which we had to find the values that would make an harmonized project from the 4 different streets into something that would be readable from somebody from outside. So that it was not like this project in green, this project in blue, this project in pink. So that created a hell of a work, I have to say, but a rhythm of every week there was a meeting. But the idea that the authorship was not really from one specific design, but it was something that it was discussed and debated as in a public like critic session in a university with the town council, that it was not represented by politicians or by a single person, but it was represented through the representatives of the different departments, that then they knew if that would be accepted within the same town council. This kind of dynamic, I think it's the most interesting aspect, because it was transdisciplinary, because it changed the way we usually proceed in the administration. And for that, we are trying to win, but we are now finalists to the new European Bauhaus. And we've presented the candidacy as the whole of the teams, not my team or another person's team. And we presented that with the town council, like Superblock teams, because I think we have a WhatsApp group. It's like a therapy thing. But we really think that we share the idea that we've experienced something that is different from what I've heard until now. And I think it's a way to go. That's my opinion, of course.
That's probably corresponding to what Dominika also was addressing. You know, there's the system, and there's your own design work, and there's maybe some sort of other, was it activism or thought? No? And once of a sudden, it's transcendent. Yeah. Take the microphone.
So this is really interesting because this is this is not normal.
How is
This
it
is
in
not
Hungary?
usual. So, and just a question: did you only discuss within yourselves and the designers and the city council, or did you also go and model things in real life so that you could get feedback? Because I think this is one of the most important things, that you don't just do it, but you model it, and then you can change if it's not working the way you were thinking. And that's the question.
Yeah. No, I think that it's very relevant, and I did not explain it, but because it's like before the competition was called, it was the time of COVID lockdown. Barcelona had one of the hardest COVIDs that you can imagine, and just before the lockdown, the city council had started this idea of tactical urbanism. Okay, so it's a longer story than the one that I have taught. I started at the mid of the story, but the idea is that they start with the idea of tactical urbanism, and that's just an issue of mobility and trying to reduce the number of cars. And this is not just a political take. It was an order from up in Europe saying you have like levels of contamination, especially in those streets of the Eixample, that they are pernicious. It's just like we know that we have rates that are not acceptable. So they thought that one way to go, different from the Londoners and the tolls to access, it was to take out some of the streets. This is basically the work of somebody that was directing the Department of Ecology in the town council. It was not an architect or an urbanist, so it comes from an environmental background, which it makes for me more interesting even, that reached to convince the traffic engineers that we could reduce one lane of different streets in the city, in the Eixample, which is our like big part of the city. It's not the city center, it's the extension of the city center, but it acts like the place where all the traffic flows. With this idea, they just closed one lane of different streets. They painted in different colors with flowers, with pots and things like that. And then COVID happened. And then when COVID happened and we were locked down so hardly that we could not go 1 kilometer away from where we lived, and that we could not access parks. That's very different from your experience, from what I heard. So we could not go into green spaces. The only place that you could actually be, it was all these spaces that were before streets, and people start to feel that the streets were something of their domain. Okay, so walking Barcelona and walking in the middle of Passeig de Gràcia or Aragó, which is places that normally it's all cars, it gives you this feeling of, wow, I'm in the center. The idea of that the pedestrian should be at the center of the street and not sidewalks to the street, which is very powerful for us. Because in Barcelona, even when you want to cross the street, you have to go, we have chamfers, as you know, so we walk chamfer 45 degrees, we cross the street, we go chamfer on the other direction, and then we go straight forward. So the idea that you are adjacent and not principal to the mobility of the city was really a discovery. And I think that was the turning point to have the public opinion in favor of doing this change. So the superblocks would not have happened without COVID, because it was the force of the people asking at that time, we need more spaces to walk, we need more silence, we need more nearby spaces. And then, of course, the project started, and we had like lots and lots and lots of sessions. We had also, like each one of the streets had participatory sessions with the people living in your own street, and then like wider forums with all the people in the Eixample, which were open. But the mindset of the population changed at that point. And it was divided in two different mindsets. the realtors and hotel people and landlords that saw the Eixample transformation as a threat of losing clients, because they imagined that their hotels will not be full of people because the tourists will not be able to access to the hotel with the car, which is not even true, but that was that was polarizing. So there was the people that were still in the COVID thought that they wanted to have like more space, and the people that went immediately back to the previous state. And this was diverted for a long time. The people with more power and this Asociación de Comerciantes, the retailers and the hotel people, went to trial to try to stop the project, and they won. And when they won, and that was interesting also, they won, but everything was done. So the works were all done, like the plants were there, people were walking on the streets because the Spanish justice is quite slow. So when they decided that it was, there was a judge that decided that they were right, and that point, it was the point where the hotel and landlords said, no, we don't want to go back to where we were. Because they had noticed that they had been increasing the fees of the hotels in those superblock places. Because then you reverted
action in physical space matters.
Yes,
just do it. Any other questions from the room? Alejandro.
Many thanks for the... Is there time for that? Yeah? Okay. Many thanks for your presentation. It was a luxury to have you here. I have this image in mind that was presented to us yesterday by Laura Kemmer, which is the image of a river where many rivers come together, but they are still different, and they are still, I mean, still parts of this river can be read in the river as a whole. And I was thinking of your impressive editorial work and also of the process of navigating difference while building this Landscape Architecture Europe or the Landscape Architecture Biennial. And if you could maybe take us a bit into that journey and tell us which of the narratives of this book are, you feel, I mean, in Southern Europe or Eastern Europe, the Netherlands, in Germany, are maybe more in the fore or of our landscape architecture discourses. And also for you both, the question if you feel that this European perspective is also helping you to do the lobby work you are pursuing in the moment. Okay, maybe I'll leave it by that. It's a big one, sorry.
Thank you. Who wants to start? I think there's the question which is more, maybe we leave you to the two of you now. Is there the European... Is there an influence of what we do on the European level that translates into the city of Berlin, particular associations? Well, I think your question was towards the ones who do Landscape Architecture Europe, but also who are somewhere as you having positions and relationships to it. You spoke about what it meant to you.
I think everything helps which becomes visible. And of course, good projects and also movements like this superblock movement, they radiate into other regions. And even in Berlin, we have now some people who try to make this super blocks. We call them Kiez blocks. Kiez is a neighborhood. Total chaos, yes. They are supposed to be permanent, but at the moment we have this difficult relationship with the city government and the district government. And it's, I think, easier in Barcelona. There's also, in my opinion, quite a difference between the administration in Barcelona and the one in Berlin, because in Barcelona, all this change which started in the late 80s with the public space, it came from the administration. It came from the head of building. It came from young architects at the time who worked in the administration, and many of the first famous projects were done within the administration. So the administration there is much more activist than the one here. And also here there are so many ideological barriers about traffic. And so I think if we would get 3 or 4 of them done, it would change the mindset here too. But it always takes much time, and well, now it stopped again. Well, what IFLA Europe and BDLA are trying is to lobby with administrations and politicians and to point out the necessities to make change and to, well, take the nature restoration law. It could be a very, very good thing for all the cities, but there's so much opposition again from all levels of society. The agriculture ministers from many countries in Germany have started an initiative to take it back, and before it has even started. And all these things, well, we start to lobby in favor of nature and a public space and people having nice and healthy, agreeable surroundings. But, well, we were not very many, and the others are much more.
Just adding one thing, does it have an impact on the European or German level? Yes, it does. It does, for instance, the concept of sponge city. Let's put it that way. It now, when we do our lobbying, it doesn't matter whether we do it, BDLA or IFLA Europe and so on, and it results to the European Commission that the water resilience strategy of the European Commission is just published, and they mention the concept of sponge city. Just one example gives us a good feeling that this has an impact, the first thing. And think of it, I mean, 25 years ago, the term Nachhaltigkeit, sustainability, coming from the forestry. So it became now a very highly potential term in many policies. And what we are trying is, in a way, both ways. It's one, hard facts. So the real contribution of landscape architecture, sometimes they need some figures, they need some chiffres, they need how to lower, for instance, the heat impact in cities and so on, and then they realize, oh, okay, this might be a good idea, as Almut just said, for the nature restoration law, that we should keep our canopy of trees in the cities and we should increase them. So this is one thing. And the other thing is we try also to do the soft versions a little bit, not the hard facts when we are doing lobbying and going to the ministries and saying, nah, but also, showing what landscape architecture can do. For instance, with awards, we have the Deutsche Landschaftsarchitekturpreis, the German Landscape Architecture Award. There will be a big reception, and it is also highly rewarded. And also on the European level, there are some competitions which draw some attentions. But unlike, I'll be a little bit polemic, unlike the pharma industry or automotive industry, where they have real mostly manpower, I would say, manpower and money. our profession is a little bit concerning the economic impact and power, not so strong that than other lobbying groups. But it's getting more and more aware on the European and also German level. It also depends on, of course, to whom we are talking. At the moment, we have a conservative and social democrat government. And we have to talk differently if we have a meeting with a green minister. That's quite clear. That's quite obvious.
Then maybe we take the Almut. Yeah.
Also, the new European Bauhaus was one of a field where we tried to get our influence in. Especially in the gathering phase of the new European Bauhaus. We sent projects, we sent text, and everything we could, and we participated in this competition as jurors and wrote loads of description and prize and selected projects which we thought best. But it was a bit of a black hole. You threw things in, but you didn't know what gets out and what does reach the decision makers. But well, we could just try, and I hope, and where we got feedback by one of our visits in Brussels, that it was seen and appreciated. So you always have to look where can you make an input. And don't despair if you don't see a result immediately, I would say.
Maybe to the second question of Alejandro, which was using the metaphor of this river that consists of many streams that somehow flow together, make one bigger river, but still have probably the water from these individual streams, if I paraphrase correctly. And to the two of you, as you said, it's Germany, the Netherlands, there's Hungary, there's Spain or Catalonia. And I mean, we do in LIE, we always let them all flow together. Is this something you how do you think in respect of your country and your culture and the profession in this background is flowing together? Is there something noticeable as a common river in Europe? The common river of landscape architecture fed from individual streams. It has a historic dimension also, right? And we all have different histories across Europe.
For me, it's a yes. There's a clear idea that the European projects, they have an identity. And I say it from the Biennial perspective, the size of the projects is very distinguishable from North American, Asian projects. So there's a matter of the dimension of the commission that you receive, and there's a matter of the way we respond to this. So even if we don't have a very homogenic way to train our landscape architects, because we come from different backgrounds, some of us have more near to Beaux-Arts or to architecture or to engineering, so there's a path to each one of our professions. You can recognize the value of detail, and I think that there's a craftsmanship in the way the profession is taught that I do appreciate. And I think that I have not seen the image that you're referring, but I picture it in my head. And I imagine waters moving at different paces, maybe, but what I'm claiming, it's just to go in the same direction. That the waters we don't cross over, and that one speed or one lateral of water gets in front of the others. So just organize ourselves and try to make that we flow towards that same direction. That for me, that would be the only aim.
Beautiful.
Yes, I think that the pace is important. So some are a bit faster and some are slower. And for example, it's been a question also for landscape architecture Europe. Why aren't there so many projects from Eastern Europe in the book? And it's also to do with what I'm trying to do as a part of the activist work, because it's really interesting. After this book that came out in 2014, 15, we had this talk in Hungary. Why didn't other Hungarian projects get in this book, and why can't they? And many landscape architects are sort of blaming the clients, because it's always it's very different. There's always so much less money for the projects in Hungary. Sometimes it's really astonishing, and this is an important thing, that to get these projects done, you need to have this natural intelligence, not only in the minds of designers, landscape architects, but also people sitting in municipalities, your clients, the private, if you have private works, and if these are not on the same level, then it's really hard to produce something of this scale or exemplariness. So this is one of the answers. We were talking about this a lot, and this is why I think it was important, this activist work, because it's really trying to push, forward a different sort of thinking, and actually showing in real life, modeling how things can be done otherwise, showing, for example, municipalities. And it's really interesting that, for example, in these countries, these people sitting, these politicians, they're quite scared of what is happening in public space, and it's also scary if it's too democratic, for example. But us landscape architects are really pushing that it should be, and this is one of the most important aspects of public space. And when you and of course, they would never give you permission to do things which are, a little bit crazy and too open in public space. But when they actually, see that it works, that, for example, public art in its beautifulness, in its openness, in creating this wonderful atmosphere where people can engage in public space so much differently, when you are just creating a piece of art which doesn't need too much. It's really all about atmosphere, opening up spaces for dialogues. And this is something which is really hard to describe, and it's really hard to do. But I think this is what art is, something which is really hard to understand and know, and this is why you have special people for it. But the main thing is that if you sort of do these things and show people on all levels that it works, then you can achieve so much. I mean, even in Hungary, these top politicians were like, oh my God, this really works, and they were happy about it. But before they were like really scared, because if something would have gone wrong, then, they would have been losing voters, And this is why I believe that these things, it's not, and it's really important that it's not only up to one landscape architect. This is why Barcelona story is so fantastic, because it's not about one designer. It's about many people thinking together about how to make things work better and to create this common good for all the more people. And this is just so important in our profession, that we are really doing this for the people. And when you say it's not design that matters, I mean this, but design also matters, and it goes together. But somehow you need to have this base, which I call more artistic, because it's about feelings, and this is what you can do, and thoughts when you are many people together. Public spaces should be designed, with so many people as you can get, because it's just not about one person, a designer. And one other thing, I think that also it was really important you're saying that there are more activist thinkers in municipalities. I think that if you have for example, landscape architects in municipalities, some sort of landscape architects, then they can really make it easier because they open up doors. There was a conference, an IFLA conference in Budapest just this October, I think, and there was a German lady landscape architect called Gwendolyn Custers. And she said that she's working now at a municipality in a small town. And she said that she is so happy with her life now because she really feels that she can make change. And because change is not about designing something, it's going deeper, and she's working on systems within the town, sort of like finding out what you're supposed to be designing and how, and that these are making changes, much bigger changes on a bigger scale. And it's all I'm saying is that it would be really important to have these good thinkers, good landscape architects, thinkers, be not only wanting to be designers in the normal sense, in the usual sense, but also taking places in important places at, for example, municipalities.
Thank you. I think this is a really good invitation. We need to become closer to the level where decisions are made and spaces are given to then hand over to those who do the groundwork in the offices, for example. With regards to time, I'd like to wrap up in this moment and invite you again to have a look around the exhibition, LAE 1 to LAE 7. So only the German projects, it's an experiment, I just picked them out. And I think that's something we could reflect upon in the German realm, for example. There were a lot in the beginning. Then you see they become less. There actually in LAE 3, there are 2 or 3 people missing who have not brought their posters because they were sick. So they could imagine a little bit more. And then it gets a little bit fading out. It's not necessarily due to the fact that they were, not as good as they have been before, but maybe because it's always possible to publish so many, and then the other countries with all their streams and propositions of other projects come in, so that the balance is always a bit shifting. But it might be worth a thought, not to be finished today, to understand how Germany's projects position within a European realm. Sometimes also we could do the same experiment for the Netherlands or for Spain or for any other country that's in there. And as we have now 25 years of professional production assembled and selected by a jury, so it's a positionality behind it, it might be worth a little research project or something. So thank you everyone who has contributed today. A big thanks to all of you, to Daphne to present with me, and other discussions that I think position landscape architecture on a level propelled by women, but of course far from being restricted to women. I think we need all of us, and we need them in positions of power so that the promising character of landscape architecture can thrive. Thank you, everyone.